Hi everyone, and welcome to Jane Talks Murder, where I'll be talking about and reviewing an episode of Poirot, Murder, She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, or Jonathan Creek. Today, I'm looking at Diagnosis Murder, Hot House. Or as I like to call it, that time Mark played Big Brother. We begin the episode with Mark looking shifty in this hideous coloured room before sitting down to watch reality TV show Hot House. And hey, it's Shane Van Dyke, Barry Van Dyke's son. Speaking of, Steve asks Mark while he's watching TV instead of going home for the day, and Mark says he's keeping an eye on Alex because winning the show could clear his student debt. The pair settle down to watch the contestants bicker, but let's hold it there to run through each of their names to prevent confusion. We have Alex, Nora, smug douche Larry, Gillian and all her beads, and Jamel, who's just sort of there. They discuss trying to vote Larry out, but Nora fights against it because her and Larry have been apparently hooking up. That night, Ninja Nora makes a run for it, dodging the cameras in order to set up a trap above Larry's window, but she drops something, and then the police roll around. But when the coast is clear, she uses her string thingy to put something in his mouth and return to her room, and into the credits we go. Some guy collects that night's tapes as the cast choose to vote off Larry, so they go to his room where they of course find him dead, and Nora removes what she dropped the previous night. Producer Peter brings Steve in to investigate, and the cast explain the situation, so he asks for the tapes before discovering Larry had been mixing pills with alcohol. Peter is excited that Larry died because it will send ratings through the roof, which Steve isn't impressed with, while the cast record confessionals and Alex sends a message to Steve. Mark tells Steve that Larry's death was either self-inflicted or accidental, before Peter calls with a tape of Alex's message, who says there's something very wrong in the house and Larry was murdered. They review the tapes again, Peter explaining that they have to switch the tapes every 6 hours, and Mark notices that Larry's curtains are moving despite the window being closed. They check Nora's tapes, which shows she was in bed all night, while Gillian explains to the others that Larry was rich and keeping money from his wife. But their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of their new housemate, Mark. Don't you have patients you need to see to? Jamel explains a few things to Mark before he and Alex pretend like they don't know each other, and they bore Jamel with medical speak so he leaves. But then Gillian pops up and warns that Larry's room is tainted. Mark goes to see when Nora is packing Larry's stuff and asks Mark how she came across on the show. He assures her that she seems sweet, and that night Mark plays around with the cameras until he sees someone sneaking along the hall and follows them. It's Alex, who is apparently kicking it with Gillian, but Mark is more interested in how he dodged the cameras, and Alex explains the bathroom and hallway are the only places the trick works, and they've already tested it in Larry's room. Mark is taping a confessional when Peter calls asking him to be more gossipy, but Mark is more interested in spending the day trying to dodge the cameras himself, while Steve checks his progress. It's not going well. That night, Nora rifles through Larry's stuff looking for something in his shoe, but is caught by Mark, and while she tries to get out of it, Mark reveals the diamonds she was looking for. The next morning, Nora confesses what she was up to and says Larry promised the diamonds to her, but everyone is skeptical. Steve checks Nora's tapes again, disappointing Mark, who is convinced she's the killer. So Steve looks at the tapes of the body discovery and notices Nora picking something up. She says it was an earring she previously dropped and explained the whole cast had been shown how the production works before the show started. Jamel interrupts, saying not to talk to Steve without a lawyer, while Mark plays with the skylight and the curtains before an angry Nora threatens to have Mark kicked out for snooping. A house meeting is called and Mark explains he's just a mystery buff that's conducting an experiment and asks everyone to stay in their rooms that night, except he and Nora need to switch. He follows the path Nora took when she killed Larry and gets his stringy thingy out before returning to Nora's room and setting the fire alarm off. Everyone gathers when Nora discovers dots all over her face, put there by Mark the same way she killed Larry, because if Larry was booted from the show, the diamonds would have gone with him. Nora says she was in bed all night, so Mark takes everyone to look at the tapes, the siren from the night of the murder being audible on every single tape except for Nora's, meaning she switched the tapes of her room to make it look like she'd been asleep all night. Nora makes a run for it, but doesn't make it very far, and is arrested. Okay, this was a fun episode. I liked the setup. I was mildly interested in Big Brother back in the early 2000s, and the method of murder will be familiar to James Bond fans. There was no Jesse or Amando, which was fine because it gave more time to the house plot, but I question if the killer needed to be revealed at the beginning. I think it was more interesting to have Mark and Alex experiment and try and dodge the cameras than already know how Nora managed to do it. Mark did a good job figuring it all out, so I would have preferred to discover Nora's guilt along with Mark, rather than know about it the whole time. We could have had Larry disturbed by the siren at the beginning, seen the wire and the drops go into his mouth, and seen the shadow of the skylight close, and that be it. Into the credits we go. Then the episode could have played out the same, except for one thing. There's a small scene of Jamel explaining to Mark about the different shelves in different fridges for different people with dietary requirements, and I think the wire Nora used could have been found hidden in her section of the fridge to make the whole scene relevant. I rarely say this about an episode, but it could have done with more characters in the house, as even if they didn't reveal the killer at the start, we know Alex is innocent because he's a recurring character, which leaves only Nora, Gillian and Jamel. More characters would have widened the scope of suspects, and we could have had more character dynamics and motives to deepen the mystery, but nevertheless, a fun little episode. We have one victim, Larry, who was poisoned by our killer, Nora, to prevent him from walking out of the hothouse with the diamonds. So there you have it. That was Hothouse. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or come say hi on social media. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, it really does mean a lot, or consider subscribing if you want to keep investigating with me. Alternatively, feel free to check out my other YouTube channels. Thank you so much for watching, I'll speak to you soon, and keep an eye out for clues.